This isn't just another talk show segment. This is a televised collision between real psychology and political theater. A moment so electric, so painfully revealing, that even the cameras seemed unsure whether to keep rolling. When America's most famous TV psychologist, Dr. Phil, walked onto the set of The View, he wasn't stepping into a friendly interview. He was walking straight into a trap. What the hosts didn't know was that the man they were about to challenge had spent his entire career dismantling emotional manipulation. And on this day, he would turn that expertise directly on them. Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments what you think really caused Dr. Phil to completely lose it on live television. From the second the lights came on, the room buzzed with energy. The hosts of The View settled into their seats with the ease of people who'd performed this act countless times before. They knew their audience, they knew their rhythm, and they believed they knew exactly what would happen next. To them, this was supposed to be another day of witty banter and easy victories. But across the table sat a man who didn't play by their rules. Dr. Phil had seen this type of setup before, a loaded question disguised as harmless conversation. And he was already prepared to handle it with the kind of calm confidence only experience can teach. As the conversation warmed up, everything felt normal enough. They laughed, exchanged polite remarks, and danced around small talk. But beneath that surface calm, tension simmered like static before a storm. Joy Behar, known for her sharp tongue and political fire, had been waiting for this moment. Her question was rehearsed, precise, and dripping with expectation. She didn't want an answer. She wanted validation. She wanted Dr. Phil, the nation's TV psychologist, to say out loud what she and her co-host had been saying for years. It was supposed to be the perfect setup, a professional endorsement of their collective opinion about one of the most divisive figures in American politics. But what Joy didn't realize was that Dr. Phil doesn't take the bait. Not ever. Especially when it comes to twisting psychology into political theater. He adjusted his posture slightly, his tone casual but watchful, and waited for her to make her move. And when she finally spoke, the question came out with all the confidence of someone who believed they were about to win the conversation. "You can't diagnose anybody from afar," Joy began, her voice calm but calculated. "But a lot of respected psychologists are saying Donald Trump is showing signs of narcissism." She paused just long enough to make sure every camera caught her expression. Then came the real hit. "Do you think narcissism is a mental illness? And if so, is he fit to be president?" The air thickened instantly. Every camera zoomed in. Every audience member leaned forward. It was the kind of question that demanded a simple yes or no, a trap designed to corner him. But Dr. Phil didn't flinch. He didn't even blink. Instead, he gave a slow, knowing smile, leaned back in his chair, and in his trademark Southern drawl said, "Well, counselor, doctor, that's a compound question, and I object." The room erupted with laughter, but behind that quick wit was something far sharper. That wasn't humor, it was control. With one line, Dr. Phil had taken charge of the entire exchange. As the laughter faded, he reached into his notes. "You know, people talk about narcissism all the time," he said calmly, "but they don't really know what it means. So I brought the actual list. From the DSM-5, let's take a look at what it really says." And that was the moment the tone changed. Joy's smile faltered just slightly. This wasn't the quick soundbite she expected. This was turning into a live psychology lecture, and she was about to be the student. He began reading with deliberate clarity. 1. Has a grandiose sense of self-importance. Before he could finish, Joy jumped in, almost gleeful. "Check," she said, grinning at the audience. They chuckled. Dr. Phil gave a polite nod and kept going. 2 is preoccupied with fantasies of unlimited power, success, or brilliance. "Check," she shouted again, louder this time, as if this were some kind of game show. Each word she threw out was confidence, layered over arrogance, and Dr. Phil let her dig deeper with every interruption. He continued unfazed. 3. Believes that they are special and can only be understood by other special or high-status people. Joy clapped back instantly. Check. The audience laughed again, feeding off her energy. 4. Requires excessive admiration. Check. Check, she added, her voice full of triumph. But Dr. Phil's expression didn't change. His eyes stayed steady, his tone cool. He wasn't laughing with her, he was waiting. Every word she spoke, every time she cut in with another check, she was walking right into the mirror he was quietly holding up. Then he moved to the next point. Has a sense of entitlement, is interpersonally exploitative, lacks empathy. Before he could continue, Joy jumped in again. Like when he makes fun of people who are handicapped, she said, her tone rising, her voice dripping with righteousness. That's when Dr. Phil stopped reading, looked directly at her, and said in that calm, even tone, I'm just reading it. You interpret it however you want. The laughter in the room suddenly faded. His tone wasn't playful anymore. It was professional, deliberate, a reminder that this wasn't about politics. It was about psychology, real psychology. He read the final trait. Shows arrogant and haughty behaviors. Then he looked up straight across the table. Now, how many people does that describe? The silence that followed was heavy. Joy blinked, caught off guard. She hesitated, then forced a laugh. That's a lot of people, she said, trying to keep her voice light. But the shift was already happening. The control she thought she had was slipping. Dr. Phil nodded slowly. His next words came out calm, measured, and devastating. Well, that is a lot of people, he said. And if you take out everybody that has any of those characteristics, then you're going to take out a lot of people, including some at this table. The reaction was instant. The audience froze, unsure whether to laugh or stay silent. The hosts shifted in their chairs, eyes darting nervously. And Joy's expression, that was the moment that told the story. Her smile vanished, her face tightened, and the realization hit all at once. The mirror she'd been trying to hold up to someone else had just been turned around, and she was staring straight into it. The cameras didn't miss a thing. The flicker of anger, the flash of disbelief, the faint, nervous laugh that came a second too late, it was all there. She had built the perfect trap, and somehow she was the one caught inside. Dr. Phil leaned back, still calm, still professional. He didn't gloat. He didn't smirk. He didn't need to. His point had landed harder than any punchline ever could. Without raising his voice, without breaking composure, he just dismantled the entire premise of the question. And, by extension, the show's habit of diagnosing people they'd never met. Joy tried to recover, but the damage was already done. The confidence that once filled her voice began to crack, replaced by the uneasy rhythm of someone scrambling to regain control. Well, things that we go through, she said, her tone suddenly defensive. You wouldn't look at President Obama and say he has narcissistic disorder. So you can't just say they all have it. Her words stumbled, heavy and uncertain, as if even she wasn't convinced by them. The tension on the set was palpable now. The laughter was gone. The audience, moments ago eager to cheer, sat frozen in the kind of silence that only comes when truth slices through performance. Dr. Phil didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His authority was in his composure. People have all the things you said, he replied evenly. We just checked every one of them. He paused, letting the moment breathe, then continued. Most leaders, are under a lot of stress and pressure. So yes, many of them will show anxiety or even traits that look narcissistic at times, but that doesn't mean they're mentally ill. Every word was a quiet reminder of the difference between science and spectacle, between real understanding and the illusion of it. The brilliance of his response lay in its restraint. He didn't accuse anyone of anything. He didn't turn it into an argument. He simply presented the truth, unembellished, undeniable. In doing so, he not only defended the integrity of his profession, but exposed how easily people mistake moral judgment for medical expertise. For years, the show had thrived on political outrage, disguised as intellectual discussion. Now that disguise was slipping. Joy's smile returned, but it no longer reached her eyes. She looked cornered, her body language stiff, her tone sharpened by frustration. What she thought would be a triumphant moment had turned into a quiet humiliation, and the more she tried to push back, the deeper she sank. The other hosts shifted uneasily, unsure whether to step in or stay silent. The entire segment, carefully planned and choreographed, had veered wildly off course, and Dr. Phil was the only one who seemed completely at ease. The studio's atmosphere changed from lively chatter to uneasy observation. The audience could feel it, that uncomfortable truth hovering in the air. This wasn't entertainment anymore. It was revelation. The power dynamic had flipped entirely. Joy had entered the conversation, expecting to lead it, but now she was being dissected. Not cruelly, but clinically. And that made it sting even more. Dr. Phil continued to speak, his tone measured and calm, like a teacher guiding a lesson that had taken an unexpected turn. "You see," he said, "what people often forget is that psychological traits exist on a spectrum. Confidence can look like arrogance. Self-assurance can be mistaken for narcissism. And leadership under pressure can easily be confused with egotism." He paused again, his eyes steady, his words precise. "That's why we don't diagnose from a distance. You can't truly understand someone's mind without context, without examination, without ethics." The weight of that statement hung heavy over the table. The same people who had spent years casually diagnosing others were suddenly forced to confront what that really meant. Joy tried to laugh, but it came out brittle, hollow. Her voice carried no conviction now, and only discomfort. Dr. Phil's calmness made it worse. He wasn't arguing with her, he was teaching her, and that made the imbalance unmistakable. By the time he finished, even the audience seemed to realize what had just happened. The laughter that once followed Joy's every punchline had been replaced by a quiet awe. Some nodded thoughtfully, others looked stunned. A few even looked embarrassed, as if realizing they had been part of the very dynamic Dr. Phil had just exposed. The mirror was no longer pointed at politicians or public figures. It was pointed at everyone in the room. The exchange had started as a simple question about narcissism, but it had become something far deeper. Dr. Phil had turned a political attack into a psychological revelation. He had shown, with unshakable professionalism, that the desire to label others often says more about the accuser than the accused. His message wasn't loud or flashy, but it was devastatingly clear. Psychology is not a weapon for politics. It's a discipline of understanding. And that's when the brilliance of the moment truly sank in. Joy had walked into this conversation, seeking validation, seeking confirmation of her beliefs. But what she got instead was an education, one that she never wanted, but desperately needed. Dr. Phil had done what real experts do. He'd refused to play along with the performance. He'd maintained his integrity even as the pressure to conform built around him. And in doing so, he exposed not just Joy's question, but the entire culture of armchair psychology that had overtaken public discourse. The silence in the room wasn't awkward anymore, and it was reflective. Every person there, from the hosts to the viewers at home, had just witnessed something that rarely happens on television anymore. A professional refusing to trade truth for popularity. Dr. Phil didn't have to attack anyone or raise his voice. His credibility alone was enough to command the room. Joy's posture stiffened, her arms crossed tightly as if bracing for impact. But Dr. Phil wasn't attacking her. He was dismantling the game itself. "You can't take clinical language," he said calmly, "and use it to describe people you disagree with. That's not psychology. That's politics, pretending to be science." His voice carried a quiet authority that cut deeper than anger ever could. The words landed like a verdict, undeniable and irreversible. It was a masterclass in restraint, a demonstration of how true expertise disarms arrogance without ever losing composure. And as he spoke, Joy's reactions told the story better than any narration could. The flush in her cheeks, the tightening of her jaw, the forced smiles that came seconds too late, all signs of someone realizing they'd underestimated their opponent. She had come to win a debate, but she'd ended up losing a lesson she never meant to take. By the time Dr. Phil finished, the audience's energy had shifted completely. What started as entertainment had transformed into something raw and real. Even those who disagreed with him couldn't deny the integrity in his stance. He wasn't defending any politician, he was defending the truth. The kind of truth that stands regardless of opinion or ideology. And that's what made it so powerful. Because this wasn't just about a disagreement between a talk show host and a psychologist. It was about the difference between pretending to know and actually understanding, between performance and principle, between those who use words to win applause and those who use them to reveal reality.